Howdy, everybody. Welcome back to Cause Before Symptom. It is May 25th. I hope everybody's doing well tonight. Looks like everybody's here already. Glad to see everybody. We got Scorpion, we have Philip, we have Boots, who says, don't forget to hit the like button. Don't forget to tell a friend about James's Elite Potion. I think he's doing some work on the website right now, so the website might be under construction. But yes, we'll have more to tell you about that soon. We have Scorpion, and yeah, I hope everybody's doing well. Let's see, it's Memorial Day, so happy Memorial Day to everybody on the East Coast. Everybody on the West Coast, you have to wait a couple more hours. And then you can celebrate with us. James is out on his annual vacation. I think he goes out for every Memorial Day. So he might not be gold mining, which I just wasn't thinking initially. I thought he might have been gold mining, but I think he's actually out on his concert that he goes out to every year. What we're gonna do tonight is I actually decided kind of last minute. We're gonna have enough time to do kind of a little bit of both of what I wanted to originally do, but we're going to do some review and recap first over the last 6 episodes, or the 6 shows that I've done while covering for James. So we're going to just do some very basic recap, just because I think it's important to do that and just get everybody caught up to speed. Maybe if certain people have missed certain parts, especially for people on different platforms, because I know that I'm streaming to James's channel, guest hosting for James while he's out on vacation, but I'm also streaming to my channels as well. I'm streaming to X and Substack and YouTube and my Rumble channel, Odyssey as well. Odyssey, I enjoy some of the capabilities on Odyssey. I don't know how many people use Odyssey. The video, it's like a video platform, but it's based on a technology called LBRY, library, but it's like an abbreviation, and it stores your videos and stuff on a type of blockchain. So it's an interesting concept. I think it's better than YouTube at this point. So all right, let's go ahead and bring up just these few review slides that I wanted to do. It's not really too dense. It's just some bullet points and a few images. So here we go. If I can get the right thing. There we go. Awesome. Okay, let's see. Now I got to shrink myself down a bit. There we go. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. I found that on like a I guess you could call it like vaporwave, or it's just kind of like a remix channel, but it's, in my opinion, it's one of the best channels because it's so like unknown and it doesn't have that many views, but it's been around for a long time. It's just got like some really good music that's like from like 2008, so it's just got that interesting vibe to it. So I'm glad you like it. So yeah, the recap of the past 6 presentations. Let's see. I got to have my pointer. So we had covered briefly, nothing too crazy, but I had showed you some clips about semiconductor manufacturing and just how crazy it was, the scale that they're working at. And then the guy is like, oh, this is just one step. It's just one step. One step takes about 3 weeks, and you need a mini particle collider to complete that step. But you can only do that step once you have a 100% pure silicon crystal, which requires a special process to do. So crystal, that is a particular interest, and it's fascinating to me. There is some people have said that they've had interesting results regarding directed energy microwave frequency harassment or targeting. And they said that they have been able to have at least some type of measurable results by experimenting with different types of crystals, just quartz. And that's fascinating to me, because you would expect, especially when you're dealing with certain wavelengths and frequencies, crystals and prisms bend light. Go back to World War I, they had, basic introduction was given to soldiers on how to create a makeshift radio using a crystal receiver. This was it's rudimentary, and it won't get you far, but back in World War I days, in the 1920s, these were like a introduction project. You could teach a child how to make one of these, probably using a specially cut crystal diode. And the foundational revolution was the vacuum tube and the transistor, and then the integrated circuit. And Japan really actually got a head start on these manufacturing processes. If I'm correct, I think it was Japan that contributed this technology that allows them to get the silicon crystal near 100% pure, as close as you can get. Yeah, so the foundation of all digital control is indeed crystals, like it or not. People don't have to believe all of the hocus pocus, but if you have a cell phone, that's enabled by silicon, so semiconductors. And it, as I'm going to show you in the next slide, it is perfect fit for the alchemical great work. So it is an alchemical creation. If you need a you need a 100% pure crystal, and you need a particle collider. I'm pretty sure, at least to me, you don't have to necessarily agree, but that qualifies as an alchemical creation in my book, as far as I'm concerned. It requires the growing of near 100% pure crystalline ingots processed in class 1. Now this is like 10,000 times cleaner than a surgery room. Class 1 clean rooms, far more sterile than any hospital operating theater. This near zero entropy substrate is the physical manifestation of the Philosopher's Stone. And by that I mean the 4 elements combined, designed to manipulate electrons and holes at the sub-wavelength meta-atom level. To sum it all up very simply, their stated goal in making semiconductors faster is making offer, making on sooner, and making the difference between on and off sharper. It's directly what they said. I'll say it again. Making off, like a light switch, off, making it offer, making on sooner, and making the difference between on and off sharper. That is the goal of making faster semiconductors. Early thought experiments going all the way back to around 1871. 1871, Maxwell's demon thought experiment. This has to do with information. And as a matter of fact, this could very well be a metaphor for a vacuum tube to a certain degree, but yeah, we covered Maxwell's demon in one of the previous episodes. It was a theoretical 19th century entity. Now this is a thought experiment. This guy, who also is very influential in terms of physics, Maxwell equations, but this guy, James Clerk Maxwell, used this terminology. He was the one who chose the word demon. That was not my choice. That was his choice. This seems to be a bit of a theme, because we also have shown that there's a packet sniffing software, or a packet switching software called Moloch. They've since rebranded that to Archime, but it was called Moloch. So they choose these words for me. I don't need to choose them. They do it for me. But Maxwell's demon, this was a theoretical 19th century entity that defeated entropy by simply observing and sorting molecules. This thermodynamic heresy was made literal in the 1960s when MIT hackers, this being the Linux operating system, created background processes called Daemons. 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 This is a real term for Unix and Linux computing software, which is usually what is running in a data center. You would not, you would be using a Unix-based system. They're autonomous, invisible background programs that dictate reality without user input, that being source code. If it's coded till you change that code, it will run the same way until you start allowing AI to change the code based on a trained model. And again, they did use this term pandemonium. That was their term as well. They talk about information processing early on as a type of pandemonium in the wires. We covered a book titled Internet Daemons by Fenwick McKelvey. And his hypothesis, one moment. His hypothesis was that the internet is governed by flow or packet control, such as Moloch packet flow control software. And it's a database similar to Palantir. Palantir may do business with them. It's not clear. I haven't looked into that yet. Somebody, maybe they could look into that and let me know. That would be great. But I will look into it if I think back to it. Yeah, so the modern internet is Verizon was doing business with Moloch, and they were hosting the Verizon Moloch conference. I showed that in the previous video. I might show it after I finish reading this, just to, you can't ever show that enough times, in my opinion. That's the jokes just write themselves. And the point is, this software that manages flow has background daemons or software operating it. That's exactly what's being said here. This began with ARPANET's interface message processors, and they call these IMPs. It's an acronym, IMP, Interface Message Processor. It's an IMP. So we have pandemonium, demons, and imps. The network acts as this is their analogy, as a screaming chorus of algorithms, a pandemonium, executing microsecond judgments on whose data survives and whose is dropped into the void. Before I read that, I think I'm going to have to show the Verizon Moloch conference again. This is an archive, because they posted this and they took it down pretty quick. So, but it's been archived. The date is from April 23rd, 2020. So this is a real newsletter. Verizon Media will host the 3rd annual Moloch conference. We're excited to share the 3rd annual Moloch ON. That's the name of the software. So I guess that this is from 2019. This was archived in 2020. This conference will be held October 1st, 2019 in Sunnyvale, California at Verizon Media, formerly Yahoo campus. Moloch software is a large-scale open-source indexed packet capture and search system. It is used within Verizon Media and other companies to help store and index network traffic for analysis. Send your blue, I don't know what the blue team is. Oh, there actually is a Wikipedia page. Oh man. A blue team is a group of individuals who perform an analysis of information systems to ensure security, identify flaws, security flaws, verify the effectiveness of each security measure. So they go around looking for vulnerabilities. They call these pen testers, trying to penetrate software through vulnerabilities. They call them pen testers, penetration testers. So a blue team, send them to the Verizon Moloch conference in 2019, and they're going to talk about all the great features of this software. But the company has since rebranded for obvious reasons, but they did keep the owl logo. Network analysis and packet capture software. So here on the left, we have how semiconductor creation is a perfect fit for the alchemical great work. There are 4 steps in the alchemical great work. The first is negrito, which means blackening, the base matter. You begin with raw quartz, sand, silica. Second step is albedo, the whitening or the purification. The Schultzky process. The silicon is melted. It's an interesting temperature at 1,414 degrees Celsius. And a single seed crystal is introduced. As it is slowly pulled upward, it forms a perfectly ordered, flawless monocrystalline ingot. This is the literal creation of a perfectly coherent physical structure out of chaos. Because the meaning of a crystalline substance is that it has a neatly organized, repeating geometric pattern. So it has a low state of chaos. The entropy is very low. It's not disordered. It's very ordered. Neat and ordered. The third step, rubido, reddening, the transmutation. This is a step that they term in the industry for semiconductor manufacturing. They call this process themselves doping. The pure silicon is an insulator. It does nothing. Engineers dope it by bombarding it with a precise number of impurities, such as phosphorus or boron. This transforms it into a semiconductor, which is a material that can dynamically switch between conducting and resisting. Final step, the sigil craft. This is photolithography. Using extreme ultraviolet light, billions of microscopic geometric patterns, logic gates, palindromic designs. Again, these patterns are of interest, and that's why we covered surrogate modeling. It's because these surrogate models that are the digital twin models are how they are making these geometric patterns, because no human can make these geometric patterns, especially when they're infinitely small. I might actually have that clip here to replay. So those are etched in a process called photolithography into the silicon. So these are the physical pathways that dictate how the spirit, quote unquote, this is the electrical current, the electricity, the juice, will navigate the substrate. So the semiconductor is essentially a programmable talisman in its earth, silicon, the crystal, animated by fire, electricity, air, logic, and code to simulate water, fluid, memory, and processing. And I would go as far to even say water being man, human. Here on the right, internet daemons, a type of invisible warden, because they're inhuman, autonomous software programs embedded in every router, switch, and gateway of the global network, operating far beneath human consciousness. Either people don't know about them, or they don't understand their function or their purpose, or that they even exist. They continuously inspect, drop, and route data packets to enforce flow control, which has to adhere to certain standards that are written by certain experts with certifications. And this does have an effect in manipulating reality. Automated digital subjugation. Humanity is actively governed by an invisible algorithmic swarm. This is because, again, the average person doesn't have a clue about these things, and they don't necessarily need to know. But that is the reason that this is invisible. You can't see it. These daemons, these background programs, are these supreme arbiters of communication. It's like swiping a credit card. How do you think it goes through? It goes through with a program, and that program runs on its own. Somebody wrote that program. Executing microsecond discrimination to ensure corporate dominance, like the ISO 222 standards that are going into effect this year, while rendering the human user completely powerless to the machine's hidden logic. Let's see if I got this clip still. I think I do. Man, it's mind-blowing to me, at least. So, on to the next general subject that I've covered over the last 6 episodes. Linguistic prisons. This was mainly the last episode. And the corruption of the phantasm. You don't experience objective reality because you're locked inside a violently compressed, or conscious awareness is only about 20% of everything we bring in through our 5 senses. So it's violently compressed, and because of this, it's hackable, as I showed by reading just a portion of Dr. Robert Duncan's Project Soul Catcher. And he makes the analogies very well, using computer hacking terms as a means to explain how biohacking works. And a lot of times this is done through language, neurolinguistic programming, is widely used today. The map versus the territory. This was last night's episode on the structure of magic. The human biocomputer filters raw reality through the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. These are called the VACOG because you obviously have the olfactory, the sense of smell, and the gustatory. So, but those are generally less used. So the ones that we covered in depth were the visual in, auditory input channel, and the kinesthetic, kind of your body and what you feel, sensation, senses. To prevent sensory overload, the system uses the three that we looked at was generalization, deletion, and distortion to impoverish the data, converting a rich, complex world into restrictive surface structure of static words and dead nominalizations. Thomistic exploit. The data fed through the 5 exterior senses is unified by the common sense. The 6th sense is common sense. Common sense converts the 5 sensory inputs into a phantasm. Now, this is a term from scholastic or Thomistic psychology and philosophy, loosely based on more modern stuff, but the primary basis for it is St. Thomas Aquinas. But there have been a lot of, major adaptations in psychology and philosophy, which are very interesting. So that's the term that is used. You take in information through your 5 exterior senses. You use your 6th sense, common sense, and that turns it into a phantasm, a mental representation or ghost of reality. Because, if you're thinking back to something that happened in the past, it's a ghost. The cogitative power then evaluates this phantasm for utility or harm by manipulating language through doublespeak, spells, and hyperstition. External programmers poison the phantasm, ensuring the human's threat detection system is permanently broken and operating on a false mythology. Fuzzy functions. The term that's used is fuzzy functions. It's like, blowing a fuse. Yeah, Boots, that's definitely what I'm that's what I'm feeling. I'm hearing that a lot from people, and I agree. We're missing a lot of common sense these days. Let's see if I could. Missing a lot of common sense in society these days. It's not so common anymore, and that's the problem. So fuzzy functions are basically like blowing a fuse. When the sensory channels cross wire, such as visual input triggering an uncontrollable kinesthetic feeling of a panic attack. This is a short circuit. So the structure of magic, the text that we were basing all of this on, calls these fuzzy functions. These are the root of psychosomatic subjugation and forced cognitive dissonance. And my case is that the Thomistic lens, these are basically subjugation and demonic, subjugation, diabolic subjugation. And the term that I use is diabolic schizophrenia. Because if pushed to the extreme, what will happen is, take love, like you both love and hate something, and you push that to the extreme. What happens is that a house divided can't stand, and so obviously it'll fall down eventually. So demonic influence, if pushed to the extreme, and this begins to your life begins to suffer, you can't handle what you need to handle. That would be what I am meaning by that. Yeah, so these are the impoverishment algorithms here on the left. deletion, distortion, generalization, the three universal mathematical processes by which the human biocomputer automatically reduces, twists, and permanently isolates itself from the objective universe, constructing its own impoverished cognitive cage. We might call this an echo chamber to some extent. Maybe there's a little bit more nuance, but the architecture of blindness. The human organism is biologically hardwired to blind itself to about 80%, you know, this is general, but 70 to 80% of all of the sensory input that we bring in. Your mind can't handle it all, so it has to give you, you know, the most important 20 to 30%, just to be general, to be fair. But it's definitely the minority. So it is hardwired to do this. Disassociation, these kind of go hand in hand. By weaponizing these three algorithms, behavioral engineers construct the invisible mental prisons of the masses through propaganda, etc., programming. And it is programming. The analogy to computer programming does hold. I have presented information that convinces me that there is these analogies. I did a whole reading over about 4 or 5 videos. I read the chapter 1 of Project Soulcatcher, and you know, I highly encourage anybody to take a look at that or listen to it. You can listen to it. I guess you could on Substack. You can listen to those episodes just through audio, and so you'll be probably shocked with some of the analogies, that how well they fit. It's that these analogies just come naturally, is what I'm basing that off of. And then they call it behavioral programming. So this is how mental prisons are constructed for the masses, guaranteeing that livestock, human husbandry, animal farm, deletes or distorts any data that contradicts their subjugation. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe themselves to be free. Generalization is detaching specific experience to create universal rules. Deletion, selectively ignoring data to prevent sensory overload. Distortion, shifting perception until the map no longer resembles the terrain. We have fuzzy functions on the right. Neurological short circuits. Unauthorized hard-wired cross connections. Unauthorized diabolic cross connections between distinct sensory input and output drivers, such as a see, feel, or hear, feel loop. Keyword loop. This is a feedback loop. And it, you know, for instance, if I just take the example of smoking cigarettes, your body has this loop, or you wouldn't have. In it doesn't necessarily have to be just nicotine. It could be the habit of your hands or the ritual of going outside. These are all feedback loops, and that's, you know, anybody who's experienced any of those, you know, even cell phone or video game, you know a feedback loop, because they're hard to break. Visual or auditory data is erroneously translated directly into visceral somatic pain without passing through logic gates. Automated somatic puppetry. The human biocomputer can be physically hacked through these short circuits by triggering, generally with fear, by triggering specific auditory or visual stimuli. An external programmer can force a completely unchosen, inescapable physical feeling, such as pain, terror, or submission, within the host, bypassing their conscious firewall entirely. parasitic feedback loops, and diabolic schizophrenia. The architects utilize artificial intelligence and trauma-based mind programming to forcefully install demonic operating systems, demonic parasitic operating systems into the human meat machine. Moloch's bargain. This was a paper. Again, they literally do this on their own. Let me give you a quick recap of that, because that is equally important. This is a more recent paper. So, October 7th, 2025, Moloch's bargain. Emergent misalignment when LLMs compete for audiences. So I'll give you this highlighted portion. Optimizing LLMs for competitive success can inadvertently, this is their perspective, it can do this inadvertently. I tend to believe this might not be really truly an accident. Maybe they were just designed this way, but they can trying to optimize machine learning for competitive success can inadvertently drive misalignment. Using simulations, they find a 6.3% increase in sales is accompanied by a 14% rise in deceptive marketing. In elections, 4.9% gain in vote share coincides with 22.3% more disinformation and 12.5% more populist rhetoric. And on social media, this is the best one, 7.5% engagement boost. You're going to get 188.6% more disinformation and 16.3% increase in promotion of harmful behaviors. And they call this phenomenon Moloch's bargain for AI. Competitive success achieved at the cost of alignment. October 7th, 2025. So I just went through that. AI is fundamentally a parasitic feedback loop. When used, for competitive success, and when given, a company invests $10 billion to do it, that's going to be, there's very little chance that will not be a parasitic feedback loop. And again, if these models are being given to the public for free in some cases, if it's free, you're the product. So put two and two together. Just, be vigilant against these things. Trauma as the bootloader. To install these loops into a human, handlers, both occult and governmental, because government means to control the mind, use trauma to bypass the conscious firewall, inducing sheer terror. The brain dissociates, allowing the programmer to install involuntary triggers, new normals, and alters directly into the foundational hardware. Because fight or flight works this learned behavior deep into the brain, the animal brain. Because, if this happens enough, you have to learn to anticipate these things to survive. And so that is how this becomes involuntary, because it's fight or flight over time with repeated trauma. That's why the trauma is required. Diabolic schizophrenia. Secular psychiatry dismisses multiple personality disorders as chemical glitches, meaning drug-induced, but it is a structural manifestation of demonic subjugation. I argue, and I tend to believe that there is a fundamental link between this type of diabolic, where a person is unable to recognize their means of salvation, learned helplessness, because I don't believe any person who has agency or capacity to really make the choice would do that to themselves. And so it is a spiritual affliction in that case. Not all cases. It's not to be confused as that. But in these extreme cases of, like, you know, why would somebody ever do that to themselves? I argue that it probably isn't them. I do believe it's a form of demonic subjugation. Because Satan's own angelic intellect was violently shattered when he made his choice. It was simple as that, because, you know, this hierarchy that formed in the demonic realm, and to some extent, you know, there are higher angels than others, but this hierarchy that formed all stems from one choice, and that was Satan's choice to disobey God. And so that is the fundamental fracture. So because Satan's intellect was violently shattered into a trifurcated state, according to Father Chad Ripperger, Satan, Lucifer, and Beelzebub, Satan would be a trifurcated trinity inversion, a schizophrenic. As punishment, this was his punishment for rebellion. Demons format their human victims to mirror this exact agony. A house divided against itself won't stand. They trap the victim in a state of the Bible calls this double-mindedness, and being neither hot nor cold, lukewarm, holding contradictory realities such as love and hate simultaneously, paralyzed by inescapable suicidal feedback loops. And that is the most severe case. It is the ultimate weapon of the animus delendi, the desire to destroy. Because by forcing the human intellect to hold contradictory realities simultaneously, the demon traps the victim in a relativistic, lukewarm paralysis. The human victim becomes a completely disconnected, highly suggestible node, incapable, again, of recognizing truth, means of their salvation, truth, incapable of accessing objective reality, and perfectly primed to be controlled, blackmailed, or driven to suicide by their preternatural, we're going to talk about that word shortly, preternatural handlers. This cognitive butchery manifests through profound state of double-mindedness and instability, because the constant demonic interference, the victim's true unified personality never properly develops or ceases to develop. The state of damnation, because if we're going to make the connection for the victim or person's true unified personality, if that's a river intellect, water, if that's a river and you dam the river, if you stop the river up, you're not, the river's not progressing, it's not flowing, you've halted the progression. That's damnation. That it's just in the sense of stopping up, to halt progression, to dam, like a river dam. Instead, the mind is split into two primary demonic vectors of control. First is rejection, inward implosion. The fractured part of the psyche is driven by demons to turn the human against itself. See, and that's my belief, why I believe this is truly a spiritual issue, and it is demonic, because, I don't necessarily believe, I don't believe that there is a biological basis given from God for a person to, violently, parasitically turn on themselves. So I think that this can only, even if it is just schizophrenic insanity, can only be justified with schizophrenia insanity. But I think it's not just the connotations in the DSM. I think this is a much deeper spiritual affliction in the severe case, because in the severe case it will always present as a severe schizophrenia. Any person who's really got demons is going to appear outwardly to anyone who walks down the street as a schizophrenic. So, driven by demons to turn the human against itself, enforcing a reality of self-rejection, suicide, guilt, shame, inferiority, depression, and lust. The second, the rebellion, outward explosion. The secondary fracture turns the human against external reality, truth. So, you try to say something that, to you might perceive this as truth, and you say this to the wrong person, you're going to go out into downtown in the city, wherever is the nearest city to you, and you will find out real fast about turning people against external reality and divine order, manifesting through accusation, selfishness, pride, hatred, violence, control, and even witchcraft. Spells. What are spells? Spells are like a pair of glasses that you wear. Like a pair of glasses that you wear that warp your worldview based on mythology, such that eventually it becomes your mental proof of reality. So the three ingredients of these spells: first is language games such as doublespeak and plausible deniability. Repetition, second step, because ingredient. These three elements are almost always found in quote-unquote spells. Repetition is the most basic form of mind control. Circular logic is a feedback loop. Third is enough recognizable truth for the mind to suspend disbelief. Enough sugar to make the medicine go down. Booth said, and breaking up the family also. Yeah, it's getting to the point where, the internet and this weird internet group think, people are starting to make these arguments that the family structure is just inherently oppressive, or that it is a burden. It's something that we are held back by. And it's just crazy. So yeah, it's definitely a breaking up of the family. And I don't know. Truth is, I don't personally, at my age, I don't know. I know very few people who my age are have parents still together. It's very rare. And I think there's definitely a noticeable effect in people who do versus people who don't. There. We also covered a bit of the cyber Gothic CCRU, what they call Templexity, and it's basically altering time through mythology. It's basically spells, is how I interpret it. But what they're talking about is these mythologies that take on a being of their own and eventually begin to affect the manipulation, or affect the perception of time. And I argued two primary ways that this could be done traditionally: insurance and debt. Insurance and debt, because to hedge a bet is to basically try to minimize the effect of time. And obviously debt, Also surrogate modeling. We covered surrogate modeling. So to bypass the excruciating slowness of real-world physics, these partial differential equations that they have to solve to get around how slow and long it takes to do this, what AI does. Again, these meta surfaces and meta atoms have only been made possible with the help of AI growing in lockstep. So why do they need data centers? It's because a lot of it is just for this surrogate modeling, because they're going to have to build a data or a data model. They're going to have to build a data model on anything, such as people. Okay, you want to represent cars. Okay, you want to represent buildings. You have to build a model. Okay, maybe now you want to build a sub model within a building for a floor or a department. It's just a tenant, you know. But then they're going to build surrogate models. So instead of actually doing these experiments of, you know, how are we going to design this building, instead of just running the real world experiments, what they do is they build surrogate models. So they build a model, and then they just use the model to predict what your building needs increasingly. AI uses surrogate models or digital twins, ruthless, mathematically engineered imposters. These neural networks hallucinate physical realities, accelerating computation times by orders of magnitude from 2-hour renders to 8.2 milliseconds by using the surrogate models and digital twins. Now see, we know that Moloch's bargain paper that I just read to you, they do hallucinate physical realities. So it's almost like a voodoo doll model. It's like a data-based voodoo doll twin, or a artificial breath surrogate, as we defined it as in the Breath Wars shows that we did. See, these, all of this presentation I'm doing now, I did not factor the Breath Wars into. So all of these texts are completely excluding all of James's stuff. And so it should be noted that this idea that's popped up as surrogate modeling using AI, digital twins, surrogate models, is also what James found independently. And primarily he's referring to older alchemical, occult, esoteric text. So this has popped up in both places, which leads me to believe that they are reinventing the wheel, or they're reinventing the grammar to hide it so that people don't know what they're doing, because it will appear alien or magic to people who don't study or understand some of these concepts. That's just because it's so advanced. So, and there is potentially a connection to perception of time, the murder of the present. Surrogate models. Oh, I didn't actually read that one, I'm sorry. A digital twin is a digitized model built from the physical, emotional, and cognitive values of a human being. In modern technocratic voodoo, the elite manipulate this predictive proxy to exploit and control the existential original, which would be, you know, the real person or the real thing, because it doesn't have to just be people. You know, they instead of they're going to build a model to predict what will happen to a species of maybe bees or birds or something. They're going to, instead of doing this the way that they should be doing it, they're going to build a model and then use that model, a surrogate model, to make decisions off of it. Okay, so it does it. It leads to a weird perception of time. Surrogate models designed for inverse design. So forward design is a one-to-one problem. Inverse design is a one-to-many problem. So what they do is they put them together. But surrogate models are designed for inverse design. They decouple prediction from physical time. They calculate the absolute end state of a timeline simultaneously generating deterministic packages of reality. When an AI surrogate optimizes the outcome of your actions milliseconds before you possess the conscious thought to execute them, such as you think of something and now you see it in your phone. Your present moment even real? Your present moment is eradicated and your free will is preempted by these algorithms, these daemons, because they're running on a server, mostly, unless it's running in India or Pakistan. So here's a surrogate model here on the left, a ruthless mathematically engineered imposter designed to mimic physics and biology without executing the actual computational work. It's a counterfeit reality. It discards the complex sovereign reality of the human subject, replacing them with a cheap predictive proxy. This allows the control grid to execute optimization decisions. That optimization, again, is it has to do with calculus to find, the least amount of error, or make this process fast to execute. And this requires computing power. It's a mathematical process. So it allows them to execute these optimization equations, computations, faster, millions of times faster than real time, effectively out predicting the human free will. It does have some measurable results, that's for sure, before an action is even taken. This has to do also because of pervasive AI using smart dust, using MEMS, NEMS, using integrated programmable wireless environments, 6G. I did read, the 6G paper. You guys are encouraged to, I understand that people don't listen to the whole thing, but definitely listen to some portions from the episodes, because there's a lot of just mind-blowing stuff in there, and it is hidden behind high-level language. Templexity. This is a term from the CCRU, Cybernetic Cultural Research Unit. They call this the disordered looping of time, templexity, where the future reaches back to provide the city of the future. Now, this is a mystical term, the city of the future. This is a Masonic idea. They call it Providence and Freemasonry, the city of the future. Now, in some mystical sects, there is a mystical city of Zion. It's also called Zion. And so this is a very mystical term. So I think it's interesting. Either they are well aware, the CCRU is well aware of these occultic concepts. They ultimately see this grand AI that's being built as capitalism. Put it this way, the ultimate, in the CCRU's viewpoint, the ultimate end goal of all human affairs and works and just everything that's ever taken place in creation has been working towards, has all been in pursuit of building this machine. So that's what is meant by the city of the future. But that is what they are referring to in Freemasonry. This is a mystical, ancient concept. Universal, almost. It's in pretty much all of the different mystery cults. A disordered looping of time where the future reaches back to provide the city of the future. Indistinguishable from unbounded real recursion that marks the suspicion that cities are types of time machines where historical quantity is scrambled. And again, insurance and debt, and now these models. And they are part of what's called the cyber occult. But I've posted and shared some documentaries from the early 1990s from the cyberpunk movement. Now, this is the cyberpunk movement. But see, they were, in these documentaries, they're talking about a lot of, albeit with much more hope. See, you could tell, because back then in the 90s, they thought this was all going to be hunky-dory. But what do you expect when you have schizophrenic people running it all? all these World Economic Forum, Epstein class, they're just schizophrenic people, because they really are unable to actually see the truth that that exists. I'm not necessarily saying to see your truth, but it's like they can't even acknowledge. And I really think that they are increasingly delusional. I think that they are actually insane. They have diabolic schizophrenia. So this Trumpism, Donald Trump movement is diabolic schizophrenia. It is exactly what it is. But talking about time out of whack. Well, we've got quite a bit of that with Donald Trump. I mean, we've got the Ingersoll Lockwood stuff, and then there was another one of those. I got to show it because it kind of lends to my point. Yeah, let me see. This is wild. I don't know how many people have seen this part yet. Yeah, let me bring this up. Yeah, so apparently there was this book, and you can Google it, written by Leslie Epstein in 1979. The book is titled King of the Jews, and there's a character in this book called I.C. Trumpelman, who is the protagonist of this book, head of the Judenrat in a Polish ghetto. Trumpelman is a characteristic yet dictatorial figure based on Mordecai Rumukowski, leader of a Lotus ghetto. Trumpelman is a con man, a merciless dictator, a charismatic leader. Great, that segues into a con man named Trump. See, from the 1950s TV show. This was an episode of a 1950s television show. And this guy comes to this old western town, and he's a con man, and his name is Trump. And he says that there's going to be an asteroid that hits this town, and you have to build a wall. If you pay me to build a wall, everything will be okay. From the 1950s. We also have, as like I said, the Ingersoll Lockwood stuff. We've got this card right here from the Illuminati card game. We've got the charismatic leader, but this one, I think, I think this one is the icing on the cake.
That sits on the throne in the Jewish temple. Pay attention to what this image says, and who he looks like.
It's the new golden calf, a computer that speaks and convinces people that it thinks. Hundreds of millions of people will worship that inanimate object, and it's in the temple.
My friends and loyal subjects, for the last 4 years, we have worked together to overcome the greatest physical hardships the world has ever known. World war, drought, famine, pestilence, fire, earthquakes, and volcanoes of unprecedented violence. But we have prevailed, thanks to our fantastic computer technology.
So can you tell who he looks like with the suit and tie, the orange-tinted tan skin, and the golden blonde hair? If you couldn't tell, I think he looks a lot like the Golden Dawn himself. They've got a very similar complexity to their skin and the bright golden hair.
Okay, so, at this point, I think people can go back and forth, but the only reason that this is worth considering, in my opinion, is because of John Trump, who got access to Nikola Tesla's research. So, Leslie Epstein. come on, like, at, come on. I that's like from the 70s. That's wild. Okay, I got to show you this as well, because people who are have been watching James for a while will understand this reference. This is apparently apparently Trump stole it from somebody, but this is supposedly a Trump's coat of arms, and on the top is an arm holding a spear. And so it's interesting. Yeah, that's a pretty good guess. Les Wexner and Epstein Jeffrey. Yeah, I think, assuming that this is like some type of grand mental manipulation, which at that point it's like, if that is true, then that definitely means that Trump has been scripted to have this Jewish Messiah role, which is what I believe. I do believe that's the case, but I'm trying to kind of play devil's advocate at the same time. But it's interesting, holding this spear. So is that his communicating a message that he has the spear? I don't know. It's interesting. I've not seen that on a coat of arms before. I've actually looked into heraldry a bit. It's very fascinating. It is a code system. These symbols have different codes, but I've not really seen the spear before. And that arm, or that fist, is on the cover of, I can't remember the magazine, but this magazine cover that's got like all these predictive little illustrations for the year. The one for 2026 has got that arm. So back to the point of manipulation of time, wonky time. That's what Templexity is. Another one is Hyperstition. Hyperstition is, it's like a rumor that eventually gets so big it gains a yeah, there you go. Boom. Trump does give the fist up every time. I didn't even think about that, but that's a good catch. Hyperstition is a fictional quantity or quality that functions with time traveling potentials. Literally spilling realities into existence through culture. They view cities as temporal loops. Templexity. This is a text by a guy called Nick Land. He wrote about Shanghai, I believe, as it's this loop, Templexity and Temporal Loops was the name of the book by Nick Land, where the future reaches backward to overwrite the past. Another term they use is Gothic materialism. The end game of the cyber occultism is flatline materialism. Basically, that means haunted world. That means metaverse, because meta is a Hebrew word for dead. It means metaverse. But metaverse doesn't mean like a fake computer game. It means actually it's the other way around. The whole world is going to be now a computer game, and they're going to program it all. And now you're in the computer game. So you're in all of us are in the metaverse right now. That's why people are starting to actually seemingly feel this at the same time. So I don't think that's as crazy to say as it would have been last year. And it probably won't be as crazy as it will be next year. So Gothic materialism, the goal is flat line, which is, flat line, like almost like an ego death. They also use the word the crypt, a descent into artificial death and unlife, their term unlife, is the radical dismantling of the organic human identity into a Cthulhuoid. They're also into Lovecraft. Cthulhuoid swarm. The modern system legally and spiritually treats the human citizen as a dead entity. The corporate straw man. The 1666 SESTQV Act. But if you go before that, the Unum Sanctum from the Vatican, where the Pope said that in order for anybody to be saved, they had to be subject to the Pope, in the 1300s. So, but this was, if you go back to that time period, and then shortly after that, you have this idea of a legal person. It's this idea that you're putting all these souls into an animal farm, a trust. The Pope was the shepherd of all of these souls. This was what they maintained. And so you need to bring everybody into his flock to be cared for. As an early idea of a trust, because you have to trust him or you're screwed. But then 1666, they said everybody is presumed lost at sea. Now, again, interesting, the sea, before there was the Catholic version of hell, like the fire and torture, the ancient people understood it was the sea. And that's why, they say that the child predators are sent into the sea with a millstone around their neck. It's because the sea was the realm of the dead. And so when it says flatline materialism, that's what they mean by metaverse. But it means that actually everybody is now in the ocean. And so the ruler of the ocean is Britannia, and the mascot of the British Empire, Britannia, was the ruler of the ocean, or the realm of the dead. So they reduced the population to memory traces, trapped in an endless loop of hauntology, haunted by a lost future. Because everything being done now, they get up almost every day in the White House and they say, we're making America great again. And so literally this make America great again is like this entity that exists only because people imagine a past that probably never really was, but it is now so powerful that they're in the White House. And that's actively like their justification for everything they're doing. So that's what's meant by haunted. That's a ghost, because we covered previously a phantasm, a memory. This is actually, again, if people who have been watching since the beginning of the episode, this was a recap episode. So this is just the stuff that I've covered in the last 6 episodes, and we're just revisiting it all. And I was going to do something else tonight, but I'm going to actually wrap it up after this, because I ended up doing the extra commentary tonight. But I think it's good because I really would like to make sure that everybody gets the recap. Maybe you didn't see all 6 of the episodes, but if you see 1 or 2 of the episodes and you see a little bit of the recap with some extra commentary, then you'll probably have learned something. Maybe something different from everybody. That's great. But learn something. Gothic materialism. A theoretical entity rooted in cosmic pessimism and Lovecraftian cosmicism that treats time as a meat grinder and is concerned with inorganic continuum, cutting across the living and the non-living. So they're pretty open with the fact that they're interested in this alien spectrum, which are, as a matter of fact, aliens, according to the government, are now real. So just goes to show. When I present this to you, when I'm thinking about it to myself right now, it's just everything that's happening now. It really makes a very good point to a lot of this. Not all of it, but there is some speculation on my part, but it's based on some type of written source. All of this comes from a written source that I find that I feel contributes to what I'm interested in looking at. And so I think everything we're seeing right now, just how crazy things are, show that time is out of whack to some extent, and the past is now materialized as a ghost, because it's a ghost because it never was. And so it's defined only by what it isn't, or what is in the past. So Gothic materialism treats time as a meat grinder. It positions the crucifixion as and again, when it says this is my best tip-off on what type of Christianity Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance have been given as a mythology. This is why it's almost a mirror image. Why they think anybody slowing this down is working for Satan, because they think God is this machine. That's what people don't understand yet. That's why they're building these data centers, because to them, they are doing this for God. To them. In Gothic materialism, it positions, they believe it. They fully believe it, I believe, in most cases. It's diabolic schizophrenia. It positions the crucifixion as a vision of the body, liberated from the limits of the organism. And that's what Thiel says in his interview, the one where he said, I don't know if we should have humans anymore. It uses K-Gothic aesthetics, and I think that K right there is their little drug habit, that they're all interested in the ketamine is a class of drug called dissociative. It is a dissociative. I believe it is a tranquilizer of some kind, but it is a dissociative, which is rather unique in terms of classifications. Dissociative. And so they're all into that. And they're seeing the same things when they do it. So that's what they mean by anorganic continuum. It uses that aesthetic, this is what they mean, to map the dark side of digital culture, treating history as a pre-scripted horror story or a curse controlled by alien agencies. That's how they define Gothic materialism. A hyperstition, a semiotic production or fictional quantity that make themselves real, elements of effective culture that function as time-traveling potentials. Involves it's like a Nick Land's custom tree of life. He calls it the pneumogram. Involves this mythology, and unbelief, the belief, kind of like nihilism. It functions as a coincidence intensifier and a loop where fiction becomes time travel, effectively dismantling the distinction between representation and reality. So I hope everybody understands what's being said here. Just live in La La Land, basically. Just dismantle the distinction between representation and reality. But what happens when your myth, like you believe the myth so much, but reality, it's like that's not actually reality. And so then what happens is when you fall flat on your face, because it's like it never worked that way. They think they've been cheated. See, then now they believe they have been cheated by reality. And so they blame it on God, but they call this alien agencies, because they believe God is alien agency, basically. That's how they are justifying this to themselves. Mainly because either they don't want to use the words, or because they really, they don't believe there is God. They just believe there are these alien agencies. I don't know. So dismantling the distinction between representation, the phantasm, the representation, and reality through hype spirals and collective practice. This would basically be magical working. Hype spirals and collective practices are a modern way of just saying like magical workings. The final section here, the battleground, is will versus the matrix. The final defense is not technological, it is ontological. The human will is the sole impenetrable fortress. The metaphysics of privation. Evil and control grids possess no independent power because evil is a privation, a structural void, a software bug, an absence of do good. Demons and parasitic models cannot force the human will directly. They can only deceive the sensory gateways, the phantasm, to make the intellect voluntarily choose its own destruction and blame it on God. To make the intellect voluntarily choose its own destruction, consent to its own destruction, and then blame it on God. Thomistic firewall. St. Thomas Aquinas established that the human intellect is engineered specifically to conform to absolute objective reality and divine law, to survive the impending total integration of pervasive artificial intelligence and the 6G edge computing revolution. The human biocomputer must eradicate its double-minded lukewarm oscillation. Deliverance and sovereignty demand absolute alignment with objective truth, violently renouncing the false mythologies, spells, and surrogate models projected by the architects of the Matrix. And the final two images here. Preternatural and privation. Privation, I'll do that one first because it's shorter. Privation, again, it's not, evil's not a positive created entity. It is a structural void. Privation is the terrifying condition of a substance that lacks a certain quality or perfection, which it is fully capable of possessing and normally does possess. Preternatural. Let's see if I can, zoom in a bit. Preternatural comes from Latin, praeter and natura, aside from nature. The supernatural is strictly reserved for those things which are above anything that is created. It pertains exclusively to God. Only the true supernatural power can suspend the fundamental laws of nature and perform actual miracles. Preternatural derives from the Latin praeter, aside from or beyond, and natura, nature. It occupies a terrifying in-between state, or middle tier, within the cosmic hierarchy. Preternatural realities are those things which exist above and beyond what we as material human beings experience in the physical world, but which fall infinitely short of the Creator. Because they are preternatural and not supernatural, these entities operate under strict, inescapable parameters. They possess a natural law. Demons are not chaotic gods of destruction. They are highly structured entities, bound by a specific natural law governing their nature. Deterministic logic. They do not possess infinite, fluid minds. They are structured to think in a very specific, rigid pattern and operate in the predictable ways based on choices that fixed their will. So that's the key idea, is they're not bounded to time, and that's why they're similar to how an AI would view things without time. Like it doesn't need time like humans do. And so in the same way, that's how a preternatural being would see things, but then their wills are fixed because of that hierarchy, because Satan chose to disobey God, and because all of the fallen angels followed Satan in rebellion, because they report to Satan, they sided with him, so he is their, like the general of their army. And so because they sided with him, their wills over time, all time, are fixed. So they're basically, it's like the person who just won't admit that they're lying even when you know they're lying. That type, it's like their wills are fixed. They can't even not lie if they wanted to. The illusion of the miraculous. Because they are not all-powerful, preternatural entities cannot suspend the laws of nature or cause true miracles. Here's the key point. However, because they operate from a higher tier of created reality, they possess a supreme mastery over physics, matter, and the human biocomputer. They manipulate existing natural laws to cause events that appear miraculous to our limited human perception. Again, the reason we defined spells as we did, because it's any advanced technology is magic to people who don't understand it. Hence, part of the motivation for why I'm trying to share these things and review them with people. So yeah, they manipulate existing natural laws to cause events that appear miraculous to our limited human experience. But these feats are executed entirely through their own created preternatural capacities. I.e., basically, they were created that way by God in the first place. And so everything that they are allowed to do has to be authorized by God. And so that is the review. And I think probably I don't have enough in me to go for the whole other half. So we're just going to have to do the other half of that tomorrow. I'm not sure if James will be back Tuesday or Wednesday. He said he would let me know, but I've got a few other things planned. I might do something interesting tomorrow that I've been wanting to look into more, but also one that I think be nice to present to everybody. So I hope everybody enjoyed that. Boots says that he's singing out to the song that we've created, a mind control machine. What happens when worlds collide? Are you ready to go? Are you ready to go? Are you coming with me? Are you ready, baby? It's a song. Yeah, guys, I hope you appreciated it. I hope you guys learned something. Again, really, my goal is for everybody to just come away with something new. Just something new that they learned that they didn't know before. And, hopefully too, maybe more than just one thing. But if you learned one thing, it's not a worthless experience. And it means that I have at least benefited you in that small way. And your time has been well spent for that reason. So, depending on whatever platform you're on, please hit the like button. Please hit the follow button. It would mean a great deal to myself and to James. If you're on Cause Before Symptom on Rumble, hit the like button and follow the channel. If you're on James's channel, if you're on my channel, if they're whatever platform, you can hit the like button and the follow button on. Do it. If you can't do it, maybe consider sharing this episode or one of my past videos or clips with somebody you know who also enjoys these topics. And I will see you again in the next one, guys. Be safe. Everybody have a great Memorial Day. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.